What's going on with these South Africans? We'll talk about that. Donald Trump is overseas. We have deals going on today. What a huge show tonight on I'm Right. Okay, let's talk about human nature, tribalism, so many things, communism, other things, because the Afrikaners, if you will, are in the news. Now, what are we talking about here? South Africa. South Africa is a very, very fascinating place. Highly recommend you look into it. We've talked about it before on this show, but it's a place, well, let's just do a brief little history of it so we have some understanding. Remember, the world is always trying to figure out how to move goods to and fro. The world figured out, hey, why don't we go around Africa? We're talking about Europe. We want things from places like India, the Spice Islands over there. We're up here in Europe. How do we get there? We really have to cross it. So they figured out, well, wait a minute, we can go around Africa. As the Europeans started to go around Africa, I want you to think about the various countries on the coast of Africa, almost like gas stations. That's really, really dumbed down, but think about it like gas stations. If you're on a ship, a caravan of ships, you are going to need to make stops along the way to resupply, fix things. It just happens that way. So slowly but surely, because of this shipping, places in Africa began to be civilized, if you will. Settled is probably a more polite way to put it, but they took tribal areas and European towns started popping up. And of course, South Africa was the most choice place because that's the tip. It's down there in the south. And there's a long history of ugliness there in South Africa. The Boer War is something that is probably worth looking into if you'd like to learn a little something about it. But that's a long way of saying there's a lot of history around South Africa. But for our purposes, we're going to talk about tribalism, the American left, the worldwide left, South Africa, other things right now. White people in South Africa, specifically white rural farmers, are under attack. The South African government pretty much consents to this. The carnage there has been unbelievable. Many of you have followed along with it, or I should say some of you have. We've talked about it before on this show. Remember when we had this interview?
So we have the Afrikaners, the South Africans. Now, not all white South Africans are Afrikaners. So we're talking about those primarily of Dutch, but also French and German ancestry who historically have controlled and owned the farmlands. They are now coming under the heavy fist of the South African government, which has passed laws that would allow the government to confiscate their farmlands without compensation. So you have the Trump administration rolling out ideas to bring them in under refugee status. Now, I commented to your producer that this is right up your alley based on the stuff that you tweet about, because the Democrats have been big on using immigration as a political weapon. Now, you can look at Springfield, Ohio, which really backfired for them there. But in Minnesota, they've guaranteed that within a couple decades that the Somalian population that they've imported into Minneapolis will continue to produce Democrat dividends and probably keep that in the blue column long term. So this population, given that they're mostly Dutch, you can look at Western Michigan as a good example. You're probably looking at least a 3-2 Republican electorate.
So what happened in South Africa, we'll get to the immigration, white people portion of this, but what happened in South Africa is exactly what the American left has tried very hard to do here. It's just they don't have the numbers to get it done yet. You hear all that talk about reparations sometimes, reparations this, reparations that. Well, what did you think they meant by that? The left in South Africa took over, completely conquered everything, and they went for their reparations. Now they encourage their citizens to invade white farms with machetes and do unspeakable things to white farmers. It's been a really, really terrible situation there. And of course, surprise, surprise, the country is in virtual collapse. They are losing power. It's awful. So Trump brings in 60 South Africans, white Afrikaners, families, men, women, children. See them there waving flags. He brings them in as refugees because they're under attack, they're under assault in their country. Now, that brings us to where we are as a country and our left and what we're up against. You see, there's a way of thinking out there that the left is inherently racist. You've probably heard the right say this before. Well, we're not racist. You're always calling us Nazis. The left, they're the real racists. And when you hear comments like this from Ilhan Omar, it reinforces that notion that the left are actually real racists. Here she was.
I would say our country should be more fearful of white men across our country, because they are actually causing most of the deaths within this country. We should be profiling, monitoring, and creating policies to fight the radicalization of white men.
Now, let me ask you something. Do you think she said that for racism reasons? Let me explain. Yes, it manifests itself as racism. It definitely does, and we will get into that in a moment. But that's not actually why the modern left despises white people. The modern left is, well, they operate just like communists have always operated, and communists are what I like to call tribal to the extreme. Tribal in the worst possible ways. All human beings are inherently tribal in some way. It's just human nature. You tend to want to group up with, not necessarily your race, although sometimes it's your race. You tend to want to group up with other people who are like you, think like you, share your values. And so it's very natural to be tribal. What communism does, as it always does, is it takes the natural parts of human nature and it turns them evil. It pours gasoline on them and makes them the worst possible versions of themselves. The modern left doesn't hate white people because of the color of white people's skin. The modern left hates white people because it analyzes all the tribes in modern America, in 2025 America, all the different racial groups, religious groups, whatever it may be. And you know what it sees? You see, they don't look at society the way you do or I do. You know what it sees? They look at all this stuff, and you know what they see? White people are the only thing holding them back. When they study the demographics of modern America, and they look at how black people vote, and how women vote, and how this, and how that, and how Muslims vote, and when they break it down in the worst possible ways, each and every demographic, they always come to the same conclusion. We would have ultimate power if it wasn't for white people. And so they made a determination, and it really wasn't based on skin color. It was based on power, you see. The determination is white people inherently are the problem. We must outnumber them and smash them. And if we are successful in doing that, then we will finally complete our communist conquest of America and burn this country down the way we want to. Keep in mind, Donald Trump brought in 60 people from South Africa. 60 people. Joe Biden brought in 20 million. 60 people from South Africa. This is how the media responded.
Trump administration, they're saying that essentially these white South Africans assimilate better, and they're also not as much of a security risk. That's really causing a lot of people to be appalled, frankly. And I also should tell people that this violence that they're talking about that are dealing with these Afrikaners, I've been hearing from people that say there is violence in South Africa, but it's affecting everybody of every single race, Katie.
And part of that is that the people who are native to that land deserve their rightful land back. That is not what the Afrikaners actually want to have happen, which are the white Africans, and so who are not originally from Africa, who colonized South Africa also. And so that is what they are saying is discrimination. Now, if the Constitution in South Africa is discriminatory, they have their checks and balances in that land, just like we do. And that is for them to, so if the Afrikaners don't actually like the land, they can leave that country.
They are. They're leaving to come here.
No, they can
These refugees are coming here.
They can actually leave and go to where their native land is, which is probably Germany.
Are you against them coming here?
Holland, probably. Holland.
It's pretty obvious. Are these people inherently racist? Well, maybe, maybe not. But this is about power, you see. Power. What helps them? Well, the modern Democrat Party is a gigantic collaboration between the most despicable people on the planet. That's why rapists vote Democrat. That's why illegals vote Democrat. That's what every scumbag in the world seems to prefer when Democrats are in power. Terrorists, jihadis love Democrats. They hate Republicans. It's not an accident. It's all about power. These people, remember what they said when Joe Biden was bringing in all the 20 million?
We also face a crisis of more than 80 million displaced people suffering all around the world. The United States' moral leadership on refugee issues was a point of bipartisan consensus for so many decades when I first got here. We shine the lamp of liberty on oppressed people. We offered safe havens for those fleeing violence or persecution. And our example pushed other nations to open wide their doors as well. So today, I'm approving an executive order to begin the hard work of restoring our refugee admissions program to help meet the unprecedented global need. This executive order will position us to be able to raise the refugee admissions back up to 125,000 persons.
Now, was that about refugees? Why did the left cheer it? It wasn't about refugees at all. It wasn't about deep inside your heart. Don't you have a heart for these oppressed people? It was about power, destruction, the destruction of America. That's why they brought in as many people from Venezuelan prison gangs as possible. That's why they brought in a bunch of devil-worshipping voodooers from Haiti, as many as humanly possible. As many as humanly possible. Because it would help outnumber the white people who they've decided are the enemy. But it's not only white people, by the way. Don't think it's just about race. Remember the one time, in fact, it's the only time I can remember, Alejandro Mayorkas started talking tough about stopping this refugee stuff?
He had a message for people in Cuba and in Haiti. Don't come to the U.S. Listen.
Allow me to be clear. If you take to the sea, you will not come to the United States. The time is never right to attempt migration by sea.
Why? Cubans hate communism. The Venezuelan prison gang, they'll vote Democrat forever. Cubans? You ever talk to a Cuban? I'm friends with a bunch of them. Gosh, they probably hate communism more than I do. The Cubans were the only group of people I heard the Biden administration ever mention and say, don't come here. The only group. It's not actually about race. But we should have a talk about how it manifests really quickly before we wrap this up. It does obviously manifest itself as open, naked, anti-white racism. Any white kid in this country who's ever looked for a college scholarship, for example, and sees the ones he qualifies for versus the ones everyone else qualifies for, understands that there's a systemic racism very much in place in this country. Remember the American media, they printed articles gleefully after the Black Lives Matter thing, gleefully printed articles that 90% of corporate jobs in America went to non-whites. They have put into place a system that oppresses white people on purpose, not because they hate white people, but because they think white people are the biggest threat to their power, and so their intention is to destroy these people. The Episcopalian Church, did you see that? They love handing out all kinds of money to bring in as many refugees from every savage place on the planet. They just decided they're quitting their taxpayer-funded refugee program. Why? Because 60 white people just got here from South Africa. So I will say this. I am not being dismissive of the open, naked, anti-white racism of the American left. They do genuinely despise white people. And not just, the black ones or the Hispanic ones. The white leftists hate white people. It's a real self-hatred of white people thing. It is. Saw a video this morning of a lady surrounding a bus full of gang members, illegal alien gang members, blowing them kisses on the way out, an old white lady. Keep in mind, the American left is so suicidal, the white ones will commit suicide for themselves and their children in order to push forward the revolution. It's a terrible situation, and it brings me to my final point. Tribalism is, once it becomes weaponized and evil, like the communists always do with it, it makes more tribalism inevitable. Inevitable. We're already seeing it, but we will see the rise of more white racism, not against white people, but white people being racist in this country, we will see its rise. It is inevitable because they're tired of turning on the television and hearing white people suck, white people suck, white people are evil, black people are saints. Inevitably, that kind of tribalism will create more tribalism. It's a very, very terrible situation. And all this happens because Democrats and Republicans allowed as many people as humanly possible to flood into this country for years, unchecked. Now here we are tearing away at each other. Terrible situation. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I am right. We'll talk to Jeremy Carl about this and other things next. Let me talk to you about somebody who's all American. Paul with Wasson Watch. Wasson Watch. You see, Paul is a United States Marine, a veteran. I know him. Fought for this country. Makes these incredible watches. No, they're not $10,000 or something like that, but they're incredible watches. They look good. And Paul shares our values loudly with his company. He says, we are pro-life. When I got my Wasson watch, I got a Bible verse with it. Does that sound like the kind of company you should support? That's my kind of tribe right there. WassonWatch.com, promo code Jesse gets you a discount on the best watch you'll ever have. WassonWatch.com. We'll be back.
President Trump is saying to white Afrikaners from South Africa, I'll give you refugee status. So we're bringing in white Afrikaners who we don't know if they're criminal. We don't know this, what they went through in the legal process in South Africa. But people right here in Newark, we're going to assume they're all criminal. We're going to bring them out. And if the mayor wants to say, wait a minute, let's have due process, lock him up. He's trespassing. It is as blatantly a double standard as one can get.
Well, it certainly is blatant something. It's just so very obvious. As I mentioned in the open, these people have decided that white people are the biggest threat to their power. So any white person, anyone, South African, American, is automatically considered to be the enemy, somebody to be smashed and destroyed while we bring in more MS-13 gang members. Joining me now, Jeremy Carl, author of the book, The Unprotected Class. It's about anti-white racism in America. Jeremy, it's obvious to anyone who pays attention, the left has studied the demographics and they've decided that white people are the thing holding them back from power, and that's why they talk like this.
Well, that's exactly right, Jesse. And you've been really good at calling this out in very blunt and unapologetic terms for a long time when other people were running and hiding. And I and a few other folks have certainly noticed that. I think, it's really been, I think one of the best things that really Trump does is it's such a mask off moment for our enemies, right? They say, oh, refugees, welcome. They say all these things, but all of a sudden, as soon as it's Afrikaner refugees, even if it's just 50 of them and they don't look like, they look like they're sort of respectable, hardworking sorts of people who have been vetted, by the way, by our government, then all of a sudden it's the apocalypse, and it's pretty remarkable to watch.
Jeremy, can you give us, as best you can, a little breakdown of the history in South Africa? I mentioned it for 5 seconds in the opening, but people don't understand how ugly the history is there and how it led to where they are now, which is people are getting hacked with machetes. It's freaking awful.
Absolutely. I mean, so the first thing to understand is that Afrikaners have been in South Africa for 400 years. So if we're going to say somehow that they don't belong there, then certainly, what claim would Americans have to belong here? So, I mean, that's the first ridiculous thing. But secondly, of course, because of apartheid, and I'm not in any way, of course, defending that as a system, the Afrikaners have always sort of been the bad people in the way that the left tends to dominate history. But the reality has been that ever since the so-called Rainbow Nation has, led in
multi-party democracy, what you've had is an orgy of crime, an orgy of violence, a collapse of state capacity, and racially targeted killings, particularly focusing on farmers, but also in urban areas. It's just been really unsafe, and they've actually been very specifically racially targeted from some of the leading politicians in South Africa, like Julius Malema, for example.
Good grief. Andrea Mitchell on Meet the Press said this.
And they got this big celebration, and these are the only, white African descendants of apartheid, the European colonials, or those who participated in apartheid. They're of all ages, including children.
South Africa says that the allegations about persecution of these people, the allegations are false, according to the South Africans. What?
South Africa says there's no South African persecution of these people, Jeremy. Well, that pretty much settles it.
Right. I mean, it's just ludicrous. I mean, it's been documented in numerous places. There have been films about this. There are numerous. I mean, when I say numerous, I'm talking about hundreds of cases of racially targeted murderers on, particularly of farmers. But again, throughout, you have this chant, "Kill the Boer," which is a sort of famous South African chant and song that has been revived a lot by, again, one of the leading politicians in South Africa. And the South African Criminal Court has said that this is somehow protected and it's not, in fact, threatening violence. But all these people know. I mean, they're leaving because the security situation there is incredibly unstable. And this is, of course, what actual refugees look like. It's families. It's not a bunch of young men all lining up for economic opportunities, which is what we've gotten used to in America.
What happened with the Episcopalian Church? Apparently they're cutting off funding to NGOs now that it's white people. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is just one of these remarkable mask-off moments in that they've been aiding and abetting, by the way, with our tax dollars, innumerable refugee resettlements, a few of which are presumably legitimate, at least according to our laws, but a vast number of them, frankly, fraudulent, for people who are not even refugees. But as soon as you have Afrikaners come here, suddenly it's a huge scandal. Suddenly we can't allow it. Suddenly it's, in fact, such a moral stain that we can't even participate in it. And they're going to drop out of this program that they've done for decades. And it's really remarkable because really the only way you looked at those refugees, I mean, the only way that you can suggest that they are somehow complicit, even if this is going to be a valid criticism, in what happened in the South African government 40 years ago or more, is to suggest that there's some sort of hereditary blood guilt as a result of being, and Andrea Mitchell, frankly, seemed to be saying that, as a result of them being Afrikaners. So it's just really dangerous language that the left is using here.
Jeremy, but isn't that hereditary blood guilt, isn't that what the left genuinely believes? I mean, it's hard to listen to these people, whether they're professors, Democrat politicians, media members. It's hard to listen to these people and think of anything else. They genuinely believe America was stolen, we're on stolen land, that white people in general, white Europeans, people of European descent, are inherently evil. Everybody native is, of course, saintly, and that, to repair all these damages, white people really should be smashed and frankly deserve it. I know people who think like this.
No, they absolutely do. And this is, again, the really valuable part of Trump is forcing them to mask off in this way, because now they have to really own that, right? They can kind of dance around it normally and say, oh, well, that's not really what we mean. But then when you're confronted with this situation where you have these people who are clearly fleeing a situation in which they're unstable, and you say, not only are we not going to participate, but we're going to drop out entirely, and this is our version of social justice, our version of religion. It really just sort of shows the sort of enemy that we're dealing with. And so I talk about this a lot, actually, in the chapter of the book that's dedicated to talking about the way we teach history in America. But again, not an accident. This is inherent to their worldview, and it's great that we're exposing it. You're just bringing 50 refugees into the country. I mean, it's kind of just amazing to watch.
Jeremy, appreciate you as always, my man. All right. The media is running an op. They're always running ops, but they're running one right now. Is it working? It seems like it is. We're going to talk to Julie Banderas about that in a moment. Before we talk to Julie, I want to talk to you about natural herbal supplements from Jock. You see, T levels are at record lows. We have lost 50% of our testosterone in this country in 50 years. Gentlemen, do you want to know why you're out of energy all the time? Why you're get down all the time, just kind of depressed, and you can't explain why? It's because your T levels are garbage. You don't need a needle, a doctor. You don't need any of that. You need Chalk, natural herbal supplements. A male vitality stack from Chalk will have you feeling 10 years younger in 90 days. Are you ready to feel 10 years younger? I'm serious. You're going to be so full of energy, you're going to be coming out of your skin. CHOQ.com/JesseTV. They have female vitality stacks for the ladies. Ladies, if you're looking for a bunch of extra pep, male vitality stacks, they have it all. Chalk.com/JesseTV. We'll be back. Well, it's important to understand the media is lying to you most of the time, especially the corporate media. Not all of them, but most of the corporate media, if you see them repeating the exact same line about the exact same story, it's a lie. It's something they've made up. And they do this on purpose. We'll talk to Julie in a moment about why. You've probably seen something about Trump accepting a jet from Qatar or Qatar. All my smart friends call it Qatar. I call it Qatar because I'm uneducated. But that's not at all what actually happened. John Carl, of course, wants you to believe that Trump's out there taking jets under the table.
Mr. President, what do you say to people who view that luxury jet as a personal gift to you? Why not leave it behind?
You're ABC fake news, right?
Why not?
Only ABC, well, a few of you would. Let me tell you, you should be embarrassed to ask him that question. They're giving us a free jet. I could say, no, don't give us, I want to pay you $1 billion or 400 million or whatever it is. Or I could say, thank you very much.
People may look at this and say, have you ever been given a gift worth millions of dollars and then not received anything?
It's not a gift to me, it's a gift to the Department of Defense. And you should know better, because you've been embarrassed enough, and so has your network. Your network is a disaster. ABC is a disaster.
Well, let's talk about why they're like this with an actual journalist. Joining me now, Julie Banderas, Emmy Award-winning Fox anchor and, of course, author of a wonderful book, A Monumental Mistake from Brave Books, which you know how big of a fan of Brave Books we are here. Julie, I really genuinely want to know. I mean, somebody like you reach the tippy top of your profession, but these people, they get to the top of the profession and they all just decide to lie? Why?
Because they have to spread that message. They have to be anti-Trump. It's their jobs. I mean, that's what they did during the Biden administration, which is the whole reason why the Biden cover-up happened in the first place. Everyone knew that the president was incapable and he was cognitively declining at rapid-fire speed. But the mainstream media even admitted after the fact the reason why they didn't ever talk about it is because they didn't want to put a feather in Trump's cap. They didn't want to help Trump because their job is to take Trump down. So anytime that Trump does anything, no matter how transparent it is, somehow the mainstream media is going to try to spin it and make it seem as if they're trying to hide something. The only administration that was hiding anything from the American people was the Biden administration. And now all of a sudden we have a president who is not only transparent, he holds news conferences, he talks to the media, even the mainstream mainstream media, who he obviously dislikes and has zero respect for, he still invites them into these press conferences. They're still allowed to ask the ridiculous questions, but not without being called out by the president. I mean, he flat out said that is a ridiculous question. The president very well could have tried to hide this. He could have possibly tried to make it seem as if, it had nothing to do with him and somehow that the Department of Defense was involved and that he didn't even know about it. He could play dumb about it, but he didn't. He's being forthright. And that's what this president does. And the mainstream media doesn't like it. They only like shady presidents who lie to the American public as long as they're Democrats, and they will continue to cover up those lies for as long as they can. And they will try to block the truth. And that is coming from President Trump.
Julie, is this a corporate problem or is this a journalist problem? Because I'm trying to figure out if these people like ABC, the John Carls of the world, if these people are just simply doing what their bosses tell them or want them to do, they're taking the company line, or if they genuinely have these feelings.
Oh, no, it's twofold. I mean, first of all, everything comes from the corporate level. Let's just talk about that. Okay, no journalist is going to go on TV and say something that doesn't bode well with corporate. Okay, corporate pays their checks. So it starts at the top and it makes its way down. And so it's bled so badly at this point that there are no real true journalists in mainstream media anymore. I remember growing up watching NBC, CBS, ABC, and I remember them reporting the news. I don't remember, the bias in the news business until I actually started working at Fox News Channel 20 years ago. And that's when I really noticed, wow, these mainstream broadcast networks are no longer unbiased. They are completely biased, and they're there to sell a message. And what they're doing is they're harming the American people, because the American people are getting fake news. I hate to say it because I always couldn't stand when Trump would use that terminology, but they're not getting the truth. And so therefore they're feeding the American people lies. And then when it comes to elections, the American people are voting based on lies. They don't even know who they're voting for. All those who voted for Biden, they didn't get the truth about Biden. They certainly didn't get the truth about Hunter Biden before they voted him to office the first time. Had we known about Hunter Biden's dealings, maybe he wouldn't have gotten elected. But that was the mainstream media that decided to hide all of that. And that's how politics have become so divisive now, because everybody actually believes what they hear. Do a little digging. Don't be lazy and believe everything you hear, especially when you're watching mainstream media.
Julie, aren't they in the end, this is something that weirds me out about it though, in the end, aren't they harming themselves, especially today? Everybody has a smartphone. Yeah. Everyone gets their news from a million different places. I don't have to get home after work and turn on ABC for 10 minutes a night. I'm up on the news before that. So if I have one of these major news organizations and I lie through my teeth and violate the trust of the viewing public, eventually they're going to leave me and then I have no more power. In the end, they're hurting themselves.
Because they're so brainwashed, their viewers, that they're never going to see the light. That's the unfortunate part. I mean, when I first started working at Fox News Channel, I remember, the brand was fair and balanced. That was what Fox News Channel sort of was born on, right? In order to be the other opposing side, because up until Fox News Channel was born, you didn't have the opposing side. All the views were one view, and they were all left liberal, elitist views. So I don't think that the broadcast networks will ever be out of a job, because you're always going to have ignorant people that are buying into these lies, because that's what they've been buying up for years and years and years. I think it's time, though, finally, for some Democrats to come out and actually acknowledge that what the president has done regarding certain legislation, regarding DOJ, regarding illegal immigration, deportation. These are all issues that should not be Republican or Democrat. These are American issues. If you are a registered voter and you're an American in this country paying taxes, you should be very happy about these decisions. Saving the country and American taxpayers thousands of dollars each, okay? $1 trillion President Trump and Elon Musk have saved Americans. Why would any Democrat have a problem with that? It's so clear and obvious. And if you are a mainstream media viewer, and you don't see that there's a real bias in this country, you need to really think again before you start to digest all the lies that you're listening to.
Julie, I have 2 kids. I know you've got a household of them as well.
They're everywhere. Like everywhere I turn, there's a kid, and they all came from me. So yeah, 3.
Yeah, believe me, I've got 2 6-footers, so it seems like mine are everywhere.
Yeah.
One thing that blows me away is not just about my sons, because that's fairly predictable, but my sons and their friends what hardcore little righties they are. I wasn't even political at that age. I didn't give a crap about politics at all.
Neither
but
did I.
Maybe hardcore righties is not the right way to put it. They have nothing but complete disdain for Democrats, for the modern American left. You wrote this book, A Monumental Mistake. Talk to me about that in America's youth today.
Okay, well, first of all, as you've seen in our country, we have adults that are hateful. We have college students that are hateful. You see that in the protests that were daily after the October 7th massacre. Now our children are watching, and they're not only seeing the hate, they're seeing the disrespect. Respect has always been something that's been number one key, number one most important issue for me as a parent. And teaching my children since they were born, from the time that they were talking, to be respectful of one another, to be respectful of their parents, respectful to me as their mother, respectful to your teachers, respectful to authority. As they got older, I branched that out. On New Year's Eve, when I lived in New York City, we would go down to the streets and we would go and thank all the police officers for their service, respectful of law enforcement, respect of history, respect your history and those who came before us. Those are the values and morals that American families are lacking these days. And so a monumental mistake essentially is that we're making a monumental mistake by not teaching our children these valuable lessons. In the book, it actually talks about and makes reference to the monuments that are being torn down in this country, perhaps because maybe they stand for something that isn't necessarily a positive thing. The monuments that were taken down under the Biden administration because they want to appease the woke. So it really just comes down to old, traditional, old school values. It shouldn't be old fashioned to say yes, ma'am, and no, sir. It shouldn't be old fashioned to be respectful, to say please and thank you. And if you do disrespect somebody, to apologize sincerely for it. We don't see that anymore. And if we don't teach that to our children now, what's going to happen to our next generation? Look what's happening right now with college students. Where do you think their parents went wrong? They went wrong. Those college students would not be preaching hate and death to Jews if it weren't for something that was missing in their childhood. And the number one thing that parents are missing are teaching their children respect. So I think we need to try to save our future generation. And I think it starts with respect.
We would get along so well. I
you heard a
I
child
have beaten
say
that
that.
into my boys. Not physically beaten it, but I have beaten that into my kids, and they get it
Yeah.
now. They finally understand what that respect brings you. Julie, thank you. I appreciate you very much. All right. We're not done yet. Let's talk about China. Before we talk about China, let's talk about Beam. Let's talk about sleeping well. Oh, I even slept in a little bit today. It was like 8 a.m. before I got up. And I woke up feeling good like I do every single day. And I woke up feeling good because I had a little cup of hot chocolate before bed last night with Dream Powder. It's got natural things in it. Don't take things to sleep that aren't natural. The reason you wake up still groggy is because you put chemicals in your body. Try Dream Powder. You'll drift off to sleep. You'll sleep like a baby and you'll wake up feeling good. That's what's really important, right? It's the waking, not the sleeping. Shopbeam.com/Jesse Kelly. We'll be back. All right. There are things happening, global things happening. Trump is overseas today, just signed a big $600 billion deal with Saudi Arabia, which is fine because that's like pocket change for those daggone people. Anyway, it's a good thing. And we have, I don't want to call it a trade deal with China. We have a 90-day pause on hostilities with China. But let's ask Stephen Mosier about this because he knows a lot more about all this stuff than I ever will. Joining me now, Stephen Mosier, president of the Population Research Institute. Okay, Stephen, we got a 90-day pause on tariffs with China, and they're going to pause on their tariffs with us. But Trump even said the larger structural issues still remain in place. What's going on?
Well, what's going on is first of all, before the delegation, Scott Bessant and Greer left for Switzerland, Trump said that, the tariff rate should be around 80%, but it's up to Bessant. So the Chinese were already worried that they were going to get hit with permanent 80% tariffs. And so they agreed to our demands. What were our demands? Well, first of all, the Trump tariffs reminded China of who's in charge, right? Many nations reached out immediately. China delayed, remaining defiant for 2 weeks. while factories shut down and urban unemployment skyrocketed. But they finally came around. Look, thousands of Chinese businesses have shuttered and failed every day over the last 2 weeks. This last week, I checked Shenzhen and Zhejiang, those two big export centers. 1,800 factories closed down just in the last week alone. The official purchasing managers index is falling sharply. And if the official one is falling, you know that the real numbers must be really, really bad. Now, here's what China did going into the negotiations. They have now said, well, we were always willing to talk to America about the trade imbalance, but the Biden administration had no interest in holding talks. Well, maybe they didn't, because the big guy was in China's pay, and Biden had no interest in enforcing the first Trump deal, which was back in January of 2020. That was a pretty good deal. This one's going to be even better. They have a 90-day pause in which to think very clearly about two things. One is stopping the fentanyl trade. And I think people should be angry about the fentanyl trade, very angry. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that fentanyl trade, Stephen. And China's the one responsible for it in the end, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we've known that for years. China, the Chinese Communist Party, knows exactly where the factories are that are producing the fentanyl and the fentanyl precursors. They working with the Mexican cartels because they're laundering the money through Chinese banks. That's how the money gets back into the real economy and out of the black economy. They know where the labs are in British Columbia. The biggest lab is in British Columbia, by the way, not in Mexico. They know where the labs are in northern Mexico. And they could have stopped 5 years ago, the fentanyl trade. Instead, they preferred to kill 80,000 Americans a year in a kind of chemical weapons attack on the United States. And the thing that makes me furious is even before Scott Bessent went to Switzerland, the Chinese said, if you lower the tariffs, we'll stop the fentanyl trade. Well, that's a tacit admission that they could have stopped it at any point in time, but they preferred to let it continue to kill Americans and make billions of dollars in profits. And I think every American should be angry at the fact that China not only released COVID on the world, which is a biological weapons attack, it also has been releasing fentanyl on the United States, which is chemical weapons attack. So I think that's at the top of Trump's list here. And we're going to see in the next 90 days if China shuts down those fentanyl factories, and better yet, if they cooperate and tell us where the cartels are, where the labs are, so we can take them out and shut them down permanently. That would be a big deal. I mean, you can talk about the billions of dollars in the trade deficit, but to my mind, the lives of 80,000 Americans are our top priority. Let's save those lives first.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Stephen, can you explain to me why it's a big deal that a bunch of factories closed in China? Now, if you said that happened in Baton Rouge, I would say it's a big deal. But when I think about China, I think about this one-party control dictatorship. What are they worried about if some Chinese peasants are out of work? Why does it matter?
Well, it matters because there are going to be millions of Chinese peasants out of work. And the thing is, Jesse, they're no longer peasants. You see, their grandparents were peasants when they came to the cities in the 1980s and worked in the factories. And then they would go home during the holidays, and they had soft rice paddy to land on if they were unemployed. Their parents came to work in the cities and then sent these kids back to the villages to be taken care of by their grandparents 20 years ago. That's all gone now. The villages have emptied out. Those millions of unemployed workers have no soft rice paddy to land on. They have no home villages to go back to in many cases. And there are millions of them. 10 million already right now, heading to 20 million. Probably, if the tariffs had stayed in place, it would be 30 or 40 million unemployed. And not just unemployed throughout the length and breadth of China, unemployed in all of the coastal cities that specialize in export to the United States. That would be a huge concentration of unemployed and hungry people who were angry at the Chinese Communist Party for failing to manage relations with the United States better. And people need to understand that we control the world economy and the Chinese economy in this sense. The Chinese economy only has one leg to stand on. The property sector is gone. The banks are shuttering. They're going bankrupt. The big property, investors have already gone bankrupt, like Evergrande. The people are diminishing in number. They're getting older and dying. China's population is actually shrinking. The consumer economy is shrinking. Xi Jinping made the mistake. The dictator of China made the mistake, I think, a few weeks ago of telling the Chinese people that they better be prepared to eat bitterness. What does eat bitterness mean in Chinese? Well, it reminds the Chinese people of the Great Leap Forward famine in the early 1960s, when people were eating bitterness. They were eating grasses, grass seeds, and tree bark to try to stay alive. And 50 million didn't. They died. There's already talk of rationing food in China right now. So massive unrest, I think, on a scale that puts the Tiananmen demonstrations back in 1989, makes them look minuscule in comparison. We had millions of people in the streets of Beijing, but we will have millions of people in the streets of not just Beijing this time, but in Shanghai, in Guangzhou, in all of the other cities along the Chinese coast. And I think the Chinese Communist Party is going to have its hand full in dealing with the unrest that will come if the tariffs, the high tariffs, stayed in place. So they have 90 days to think about what they're going to do. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to stop the fentanyl trade, and they're going to try to make nice for a while. Now, I don't trust the Chinese Communist Party. They violated every agreement they've ever signed. I mean, the nuclear non-proliferation agreement violated. They sent nukes to Pakistan, which is why we have a nuclear power confrontation, in between India and Pakistan today. Everything they've promised to do, from the promise of Xi Jinping in the Rose Garden back in 2016, where he promised Obama that he would stop the cyber attacks. Of course, the cyber attacks continued. They intensified. So all of these things that the Chinese government says, you can't take at face value. We have to look at what they do, and we will have a 3-month period to look at what they do now.
Well, fingers crossed. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you, sir. All right. Lighten the mood. Next. All right. It is time to lighten the mood. And you know what? I love music. I do. I've always loved music. And Stevie Wonder's music. You know that? I like Stevie Wonder's music. I've always liked Stevie Wonder's music. Superstitious, every time it comes on, I jam to it. And so today is Stevie Wonder's birthday, and we wanted to give him a little shout out with this video.
I can't even remark about what just happened. I can't even remark about what just happened. Does anybody realize that this is Stevie Wonder?
Happy birthday, Stevie. See you tomorrow. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.